Alright, so in this video we're going to be reviewing solving two-step and multi-step inequalities. These are really similar to solving two-step and multi-step equations. Really the only difference, the only thing you have to pay attention to is if you're dividing by a negative number. So when you're solving inequalities with more than one step, you still use the inverse operation to isolate the variable. All that means is undo whatever is being done. So the order of the inverse operation is the order of operations in reverse. So that's same sentence we've seen a whole bunch of times now. You can check your solution by substituting the endpoint and another endpoint in the solution back into the original equality. That is just saying pick a point and plug it in and see if it works. So what is happening to this? I have x being multiplied times -5 and added to 3, and it's noting that it's less than 23. So it wants you to solve and graph the solutions. So what's happening? You got the multiply and the adding. I have to undo the adding first. So instead of adding, I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. I'm left with -5x is less than 20. Divide both sides by -5. This is where when you divide by negative you have to reverse the inequality sign. So this is the only thing that's different, is if you're changing the sign, you're changing the sign is the way I try to think of it. I am changing the sign of this side, it's going from negative to positive. I'm changing the sign of this side, so instead of positive 20 it ends up being -4. If we're changing all those signs, we might as well change the middle sign too. If you're dividing by a negative, you flip the sign. The endpoint, -4, is not actually a solution. So if I plugged in -4 and plug it in, is 23 less than 23? No, it's not. So that one's not going to work. But if I tried 6, right, because anything greater than -4, if I tried 6 and plugged it back in, -27 is in fact less than +23. So this is what the graph should look like. It's an open circle on the -4 because there's no line underneath your inequality, and it's moving in that direction. So if we're going to solve each inequality and graph them, the first thing I'm going to do here is undo the -10. So I'm going to add 10 to both sides. So I get -3e is less than or equal to, and then I go +10 and -4. If I needed to, I'd put that in the calculator and found out that that answer is just 6. So now I'm going to divide by -3, dividing by a negative. That's when I remember that I have to flip my sign. So I'm going to say that e is no longer less than or equal to, but greater than or equal to, and instead of +6, it's going to be -2. So I'm going to start at -2. I'm going to draw a circle there. I'm going to look up here to see if I fill it in, and sure enough, that's a line underneath there. I'm going to fill that in, and I'm going to draw my arrow out in this direction. Okay? For the next one, what's happening to the letter C? Well, it's being divided by 2 and then added by 8. So I've got to undo them in the reverse order. So this was the first thing, that's the second, so this becomes the first thing that I undo. So instead of +8, I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides, and I get C divided by 2 is greater than, and then 11 minus 8 is 3. I'm going to multiply both sides by +2, so nothing's happening as the multiplication division part with a negative, so I do not need to flip the sign. I'm not changing any signs anywhere. So C is going to be greater than 6. So I'm going to take my 6, I'm going to draw an open circle, and I'm going to go greater than, and I double check, do I need to fill it in? There's no or equal to sign, so I don't need to fill it in. For the next problem here, I'm going to subtract both sides by 3 because I'm trying to isolate that S right there. So when I do that, I get 12 is less than or equal to, this negative sign doesn't go away because the number in front went away. It stays. So -4s. To undo the -4, I'm going to divide both sides by -4 because that was multiplication. So I'm dividing by a negative. So I need to flip this sign around. So I get -3 is now greater than or equal to S. Now in order to graph these, I really prefer my letter to be on the left side. And the reason I want this is because that will tell me which way to make my arrow go. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to literally flip the whole thing over. When I do that, that sign's going back. The small point has to always be pointing at S at this point. So I'm going to say S is less than or equal to -3. So either -3 is greater than S or S is less than 3. Those two sentences mean the exact same thing, so I can rewrite it that way. So I'm going to put a circle around -3, or the mark for -3. I look here and I can fill it in, so I'm going to fill it in. And because my letter's on the left side, I can just make the arrow go in the direction of the inequality sign. Please keep in mind, it's going the opposite way from this one. I had to flip it around.